Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, I hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. It's heating up here in the summertime, and hopefully everyone's staying cool. Okay, today, folks, we're going to talk a little bit about cooperation over controversy and a little bit of some stuff in between. But essentially, cooperation over controversy, what are we talking about with that? Well, essentially, it's less energy, less work, much more difficult to be less cooperative or controversial than it is to be cooperative. Oftentimes, though, we've been addicted to dopamine hits that come from being, even if you're not starting controversy, if you're just a part of the controversy, swept up in it, addicted to hearing, what's the latest rumor, all those things, right? And we can all fall prey to this. Some of this is difficult because we ride the tight line between staying informed and then being caught up. So you have to be careful that it's not, for the wrong reasons, right? And it's difficult to separate if you're not don't have some self awareness in this regard. But cooperation over controversy, obviously, we want to cooperate with one another. It doesn't mean we want to completely give up our voice or give up our ability to collaborate and just, shut ourselves down. That isn't what cooperation is. It's coming together, being heard, and synergizing our ideas and collaborating together to come up with some new innovations and better ways of getting some things done sometimes, right? Or just ironing out some things that went wrong and what we can do not to do those things again, right? Preventative measures, right? But within that, too, we also have to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, to be cooperative also means we're kind of a rock to somebody, right? Even if it's a peer that we work with, as we're part of the workforce, a part of the culture at large, or leaders, right? You could be leaders of your family, you could be leaders of groups in your community, you could be leaders in your organization, that sort of thing. Who are we a rock to? And what does that mean? I guess in some senses, you could see or say that the idea of being a rock to somebody else is it's showing a level of constancy, right? You're a person who's trustworthy. You're a person who can be relied upon. You're a person who will tell folks, give them the straight truth, really, right? The straight, honest truth. And sometimes that's difficult. It's difficult for all of us because sometimes the truth can be hurtful, right? And so we also have to be, kind of diplomatic, but not hold back the reality of the situation at the same time. It's difficult as well in society because so much becomes transactional, right? If a family, if you're treating your family like business associates or uh, tenants, right? Or like people who work in your organization, but not really like family, well, that's kind of not what family's about, right? It's not a transactional, you might have transactional things you do with family members, but you don't treat them transactionally, right? That's not what love and engagement and protecting the love in everyone's life is all about, right? But to be honest with you, it's not a whole lot different in your organizations too, because if you're unable to engage with others without seeing them as a means to your end, right? People aren't just working on your team to elicit a certain outcome. There may be truth that they are doing that, but they're on your team because they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And they're expecting you, if you're a leader, to lead that. And that's why the vision is important because we want to be working toward things that are greater than ourselves, right? It could be a public service that the organization serves, and so on, right? And some of that public service can also be entertainment, right? It can be because obviously we know there are software engineers who are designing all the little devices and gadgets we use to entertain ourselves and do videos like this, for example, and other things, right? So it's not all just food and water and all the essentials. Some of it's a little more than that, and that's okay, right? That's also those things also provide a service. but we want to feel a part of that broader vision, right? And to be a part of that broader vision, we kind of have to be a rock to one another. We have to be reliable, and we have to be, there has to be a level of respect, right? And we have to be able to trust that each other's character is something that is supportive, not divisive or dividing, right? Something that brings folks together, not separates them and puts them at odds with one another, right? That's where the cooperation over controversy is essentially dividing, right? And cooperation is more of a uniting. If you think of it like saw blades going in the proper direction with the grain of the wood, that's cooperation. Reverse those saw blades and they rip that wood up and jam the blade, and it's just a whole lot of controversy. And that's essentially the visual that you can draw. You can get more accomplished more cleanly, more smoothly, less hassle when we're cooperating with one another to figure it out, right? When we're not, it's usually problematic. Now, this may seem, well, Steve, that's pretty stinking obvious. And I would say, yes, it is. But we are human beings. So to be a rock, for one another, that's no easy task because we have to live up to the standards that we hope to have in our lives. But we also have to be humble with ourselves and others to understand that we are human and we can make mistakes, and not to let our pride and ego prevent us from owning those mistakes when they happen. Oftentimes, if people own their mistakes when they happen, boy, things are just smooth sailing straight along. But when they double down, you could say double down on dumb, really, right? On the dumb things we can be doing as humans. We can do some dumb things. We can say some dumb things. I mean, that's just no mystery. We're not perfect, and therefore we can't. It's simple math, folks. But as long as we have enough self awareness to either acknowledge it when we figure it out that we, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. It can be by omission. We can make mistakes of omission as well, and to own those. And if it's brought to our attention, to be humble enough to go, oh gosh, that's not what I meant by that, just so we're clear. Anyway, things of that nature, right? And a myriad of plenty of, there's, look, folks, we're human beings and we make mistakes on such a level that it's amazing that our culture has advanced to the level that it has. And sometimes we have to stop and look around and smell the roses and say, for all the silly things that happen when people are doubling down, we could be a lot worse, even, right? It's amazing to think we could be worse, but we could be worse. And I think that's another element of cooperation over controversy is to be a safety net, a rock or a safety net for others as well, to be able to make sure that we don't get worse, right? Not to say, oh, well, I am who I am and I'll never look, folks, if I had never done anything, I never left my hometown, I never went to school, I never did different things, and the journey's different for everyone, right? Not everybody has to go to school or leave their hometown, but I'm just using my example. If I hadn't done different things and went down different roads, I wouldn't gained enough experience to develop further and further, right? And then find that I enjoy developing more and more, right? And others may as well. But if I would have not done anything and said, well, I'm good as I am, right? There's no crime committed there. But would I have developed to who I am now? No. Mistakes and all, we developed who we are because we were able to take a little bit of a risk. But taking some of that risk, we also have to be humble and understand that, some risks, it's like golf. I think I can make it over those trees to the green. And then you try, and then you're in the woods, right? And then you go, why did I try that? Right? That's a risk. And you tried it and you get in the woods. Well, guess what? You learned from that experience. You hit out of the woods, you get back on the field of play, and you go back at it. It's pretty simple. It's almost as simple as that. But can you imagine if all your friends, now they might chuckle a little bit when you go in the woods because, that's just how we are as people, right? Especially if we're playing a sport like that. But if your friends are constantly, or people are constantly unsupportive and or telling you, hey, you should hit into those woods. Right? That's not good. That's not somebody being a rock for you. Somebody being a rock for you is like, hey, I see you're lining up toward those woods. Are you trying to go over those trees? And you might say, well, I think I could make it. It's like, well, the wind's coming from this way and that and X, Y, Z. Maybe you should just, hit up short here on the bend. So, so you do, right? And you hit a little bit short, but you hit a safe shot, and you're the better for it, right? You didn't go through that. I used to tell my son, you don't have to make the same mistakes everybody else did, right? You can learn from the mistakes that others have made. We don't have to go through life just, hey, well, so and so did it, so I can do it, and it's fine. Right? Well, do you think the result's going to be different? And if it is, you may have gotten lucky once, but you can't make a series of life choices out of taking extreme risks of that nature, right? So, you have to gauge this, but at the same time, we have to be humble enough to learn from the mistakes we made and move on. And people have to recognize as well when you move on. So if you reprimand a team member, or if you're a peer and somebody, says, hey, when you did this, this really messed up X, Y, Z, and that didn't help anything. And you need to be able to go, you know what, you're right. Because if you don't, if pride and ego prevent you from being that person that can own a thing, when somebody reprimands you in that way, obviously we want to be respectful. And even in reprimands, we want to be respectful. There's a proper way and an improper way to reprimand somebody. But but even in that situation, we need to receive the reprimand as a good thing, right? We need to understand it is what it is. And some things can come in a form of leaving an organization, or leaving a particular group that you're associated with within culture, civic group or other things that you're involved with. They may say, hey, we're moving on. Thank you for your services. And you might say, what? Right? And and so you're thinking, oh, well, they should have been a rock for me. Well, but were you a rock for them? Was it just a transactional relationship? Now, this is where it gets tricky in organizations. If you're just looking at your employees strictly as transactional, and you're just looking at the leadership team where you work strictly as transactional, then there's a piece of you you're not bringing to the whole situation. A team, they're accountable to one another. They're accountable to one another, and they serve and help and are there for one another. Right? It goes above and beyond just showing up and getting watching the clock and getting a paycheck and going home. If you're just showing up, watching the clock, getting a paycheck and going home, you're not really a member of that team. And actually, you shouldn't be surprised if you're not invested to that level. If somebody does decide to say, you know what, thank you for your services, have a nice day. To really be valuable to your team, you have to engage and be invested in their efforts, right? You have to be invested in that vision. And if you're not, you really shouldn't be a part of that organization to begin with. And this is, you shouldn't just settle for something you're not aligned with. Your vision isn't aligned with somebody, with the organization. You got to make the call yourself and say, you know what, I'm not really aligned with this group. And it might be that the group is totally dysfunctional and totally toxic, and it's just chaos on roller skates. And you might be saying, you know what, thank you, have a nice day. And you're essentially firing them, but you're moving on, right? So happens all the time. That being said, always do your best to engage and try to help the team. I would always look at any team and go, you know what, before you can just say, you know what, this team isn't really worthy, give the effort. Give the effort of trying to bring folks together and getting on the same page and working together and building up that team cohesion. Because I think you'll be surprised that if you do, you're going to find that you can achieve some great outcomes. And then that'll build momentum, and that confidence and that repeatability of doing these things. That's cooperation, right? And it's not perfect. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be some fairy tale scenario all the time. But you have to be committed to it, right? And you have to be able to own and be humble to the mistakes you make when you make them. And if you can't, well, then that alignment's just not going to be there. It's not going to be there for you. If you can't do it, it's not going to be with you if others can't do it either, right? So Remember, cooperation over controversy. Who are you a rock for? And who's a rock for you? Who's that stable person in your organization, in your life, in culture, who you can rely on, right? To give you sage advice, to listen to you, to let you blow off a little steam, whatever, right? All the things. But is also not going to support you when you start going off into the woods, right? When you start hitting your golf ball off into the woods, they're going to say, yeah, you're off in the woods right now, bud. And they may still be supportive, but they're going to let you know you're in the woods. That's what you want. But there again, be careful. There's some people who are trying to get you to go into the woods, or happy when you get there, right? Happy when you fail. You don't want that. That's not being a rock. When you're satisfied when other people go through struggles and fail and all these things. If you're on that side of the fence, even if you're pretending to be cooperative, you're really about controversy. And, nobody wants to be that person either. So, all right, folks, just a little bit on cooperation over controversy. Hope you have a great week. Remember to hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage one another. And when you do that, not only are we helping to transform culture, but we're transforming our own lives. And that's an amazing thing. And you should never take any of that for granted because it's a special thing. All right, folks, hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.